4 Idaho college students savagely killed. Well, let me ask you a question. Could the murder walk with some evidence violations? That would be unthinkable. But today, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It is what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, charliecrimebuster.com, and peacemakernetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster, where we dive into the latest developments in high-profile legal cases. I'm your host, Charlie Crimebuster, and today we're bringing you an important update on the trial of Bryan Kohberger. Now, this case has garnered significant attention, has been a focal point in discussion about justice and legal proceedings. But before we proceed, let me take a moment to give you an invitation to reach out with a shout-out. Yep, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. We call it reaching out with a shout-out. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about other episodes you'd like for us to cover. You can even lodge objections. It is a safe zone. You have a right to disagree. We love to hear from you. We love that interaction. Thank you for many of you who have contacted us. Again, reach out with a shout-out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, if you'd like to support the case, then go on over to peacemakernetwork.com. There you're going to find how you can not only support the program, but you can support those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We are talking about law enforcement, first responders, and those brave men and women of the military. Read all about that at peacemakernetwork.com. Then if you'd like to know about other episodes, we invite you to our website, charliecrimebuster.com. There you're going to find a whole bunch of episodes that you can, as James Buckland refers to it, binge listen. That's right. You can binge podcasts. That's right. You can binge your podcast listening there at charliecrimebuster.com. And don't forget, we now have a new YouTube channel. Be sure and check that out. We're going to put all these links right there in the show notes. All you got to do is just reach right over there and click, and you will be right there. All right, my friend, thank you for joining us on the Charlie Crime Train today. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the details, and you would have had to have lived under a rock during that time, well, Bryan Kohberger, he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of burglary, and the stabbing deaths of these wonderful, beautiful students there in Idaho. We're talking about Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. That happened back in November of 2022. We followed that firsthand. We were right there as we were looking for the guy or person or persons who did this terrible deed. Now, this case has seen a series of significant events that has shaped the way that this case is developed. A jury is currently scheduled to begin on August 11, 2020 in Boise, Idaho. Now, early on, as we take the time to share a little background with you, I do want to make a note, though, before we get into this, that some of these facts and this information is going to be extremely disturbing. And as we say in our intro, listener discretion is certainly advised. It was on the early morning of November the 13th, 2022, when 4 University Idaho college students were stabbed to death there in a rental that they shared that was close to the campus there. The 2 female victims, Madison Mogan and Xana Carnotto, well, they lived in the house. They also worked at a same local restaurant. The third one, Kaylee Gonzalez, had recently moved out of the house and returned to attend a nearby party. And there was a 4th victim, Ethan. He was the male. Ethan Chapin. He was Carnotto's boyfriend, and he was sleeping over on the night of the attacks. There were 2 other female roommates who also lived in the house. However, They were not attacked. Now, the surviving roommate stated that she opened her door twice within a short span of time, and the second time she heard what sounded like a cry coming from Kenoda's room. And she also said that she heard a male voice, and that male voice said, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." There were security cameras right in the area, and they also picked up on those security cameras during that same time the sound of whimpering, a loud thud, and then a dog barking numerous times. That was around 4:17 a.m. in the early morning of November the 13th, 2022. Now, a surviving roommate, according to reports, allegedly, she opened her door a third time, and there she saw what was some person, some figure, was in black clothing, a mask covered his mouth and his nose. She said he was walking toward her. She said she did not recognize him, that he walked past her and used a sliding glass door to exit. Now, the roommate said that she said she was just really scared silly. Actually, the word was frozen shock phase, and then she went and locked herself in the room. Now, these 4 precious students were stabbed to death savagely on the 2nd and 3rd floors there in that house. They had already been in bed. According to police, they were not gagged, they were not restrained. At those walls, well, you talk about a crime scene. They were splattered with blood. Now, Mogan and Gonzalez, they were found in Mogan's bedroom. Kenoda and Chapin were found in Kenoda's bedroom. Before that 911 call was made, these roommates, they actually called friends to come to the residence. And according to reports, they believed that one of the 2nd floor victims was unconscious, was not waking up. So someone in the residence, they got their phone and they called 911. That was around 11:58 a.m. Now, stay with me. These murders allegedly happened in the early morning hours of around 4 o'clock. This was over 7 hours after the homicides had occurred. There, the surviving roommate's phone requested help, 911, for an unconscious person. Now, that identity was not really released, but police did confirm that the caller, the one who made that call, was not considered a suspect. So here are these precious young people, these college students, whole life ahead of them, stabbed to death in a brazen attack. When police arrived, well, the door to the home was open. There was no sign of forced entry or damage inside the home. Nothing appeared to be missing. The 2 surviving roommates, they were there on the property when the popo got there, and there were friends of the victims there as well. All of these 4 precious victims were pronounced dead about noon. Detectives, well, they're saying again that they believe that the killings occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. They searched the residence. They found one of the students' dog that she had shared with her ex-boyfriend. That dog, by the way, was alive, unharmed, and found on the 3rd floor. Now, my friend, initially this case was a really whodunit type of case. And we're going to briefly get caught up on that investigation, and then we're going to share with you why the unthinkable could take place. And that's according to proceedings that was in court this past week. They've nabbed the guy that did it. We'll tell you all about that. They made the arrest. He's been charged with crimes, murder 4 times, burglary once, and they are seeking the death penalty. And my friend, now the court is hearing pleas from the defense that could exclude major evidence. If that happens, the unthinkable happens. This was an unthinkable crime, and if this evidence was not allowed to get to the jury, that too is unthinkable. So we're going to tell you all about that in just a moment. But you know, from time to time, we like to lighten the load a little bit to kind of take away from the dark things that we share. And so we do that with what we call our Charlie Crimebuster Crazy Story. So right now, it is time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now, my friend, this is a person who wanted to score some dope, not report one. We often say on Charlie Crimebuster about your digital footprint, and we encourage people to pause before you post. And you need to be careful what it is that you text to someone. But in this case of this crazy crook, you should also be careful who you text. That's right. It was a tech challenge Florida woman. Yep, Florida woman. Not Florida man. Florida woman who accidentally, now get this, you can't make it up. This lady texted a cop instead of her drug dealer to buy fentanyl. That's right. She unwittingly narked on herself. That's according to the popo who arrested her. Octavia Wells, 41 years of age. She had been headed to rehab on New Year's Eve when she actually texted a man that she had previously entered into her phone as PJ. And she allegedly offered PJ $45 for the drugs. That's according to the Bay County Sheriff's Office. Well, the dim-witted druggie, she arranged to meet the guy on the other line. Well, she there at Tom Thumb convenience store, right there in Panama City, Florida, which, by the way, had some more white stuff hitting there. It was snow this past week. Can you believe it? Snow in Panama. But here it is in Panama City at the Tom Thumb convenience store. And according to a police report obtained by the Smoking Gun, when she arrived at the store, it wasn't her drug pusher she found, but she found narcotic cops waiting there to arrest her. And then very soon, Octavia Wells, she learned that she had mistakenly now contacted Stephen Pettyjohn, an investigator with the Bay County Sheriff's Office. And guess what? He was also known as PJ, just like her drug pusher was. And she had had a previous altercation with this detective, this investigator, and he too was in her phone under PJ. Only problem, she texted the wrong PJ. She said that she thought that Pettyjohn's name was similar to her drug dealer's, and that was all according to the arrest affidavit. Well, details of the previous interaction with the investigator were not described in the complaint. However, it was enough to get the investigator's phone number in her phone, and she mistakenly texted the investigator instead of her drug pusher. She was charged with unlawful use of a communication device, possession of drug paraphernalia, and also driving with a suspended license. So, my friend, this crazy crook who was texting her drug pusher for more drugs, who mistakenly ended up texting the popo himself, that, my friend, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. All right, now, my friend, back to our main focus. The Bryan Kohberger case, actually resulted into a nationwide manhunt. You see, at first, police had no idea who they were looking for. It had the attention of law enforcement for sure. In fact, the investigation was led by the Moscow Police Department, called MPD. It was supported by the Idaho State Police, ISP, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. There's enough initials in there for a soup, right? Here we got the MPD, the ISP, and the FBI, but it just says there were a whole bunch of law enforcement people on this. And altogether, about 130 members of law enforcement from 3 different agencies worked on the case. You see, my friend, they did not know who had done this terrible deed, who had broken into this home, who had gotten there. Actually, I don't guess they broke into it because there was no really sign of forced entry. And this house was used as a party house on campus, so people would come and go as they would. You know, nothing like this had ever happened in the area. This was a terrible, terrible tragedy that just shocked the community, as you can imagine. And so here was these 4 students brutally stabbed to death in a brazen killing spree. Here these people were killed. These 4 beautiful young people were killed. And nobody knew who had done the deed. And so, of course, the Moscow police requested the public to help get a mini video of the house that had been recording the night of the killings. There was a phone tip line set up, as they do often in these cases. An email address was created through the FBI so the public could then get information to the officials. So now, and they did a really good job at this, they reached out to the community. They asked for help, and boy, did they get it. As of December the 5th, 2,600 emailed tips, 2,700 phone calls, 1,000 digital media submissions, all submitted to these tip lines. And on December the 24th, investigators then reported they had received at least 15,000 tips on the case. Now, after receiving hundreds of tips from the public, on December the 15th, then they actually announced that they were searching for a particular car, a Hyundai Elantra, made between 2011 and 2013. You see, a camera in the area had captured video of a white or light-colored Elantra around the time of the murders. And investigators noticed that this car had made multiple passes along the route near the residence. By the way, if I remember right, when we were investigating this case, as it was happening in real time, we brought out the fact that there was a convenience store clerk who was kind of bored, went looking through some of the video surveillance around the time of the murder from their store that was nearby in the area, and it was this convenience store clerk that actually contacted the police and mentioned about this white Hyundai Elantra. So another recording showed that Elantra, same Elantra, they thought the same one, passing by the victims' homes around 3 times, which began around 3:29 a.m. in the morning. And then another one at 4:04 a.m., another one at 4:20 a.m. And that time, the car was seen speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. So now they have a car. And so the public then was alerted about this vehicle. And then they went into another area. And you need to listen to this very carefully because this is the area that's really being debated now. And this is the area that the defense is really working on. You see there at the scene, there was a knife sheath and there was some DNA left there. And so now they actually used a public database, genealogy database, and they identified a partial match to that individual with a family connection to Kohberger. And that, of course, we know now was Papa Kohberger. They actually had, in that database, they found Kohberger. They found that he was a match, partial match to the DNA. And see, Kohberger, by the way, had also found that he was driving that same type of car, and that was located at a nearby campus. So here's 2 people that really deserve some recognition in this case. I don't know if they're going to get it or not, but they deserve it. Number 1, the clerk. The clerk that saw that vehicle while this clerk was bored, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and nothing happening very much, and she was looking at that surveillance, the surveillance of the video. She was looking at it. She found that car. She alerted the police. That person deserves an attaboy. That person is a hero in this case. The second one was a campus officer at a nearby campus, not at the University of Idaho, but another nearby campus, who found that white Hyundai, and then they were able to put that Hyundai, connect it to Bryan Kohberger. Now they have Bryan Kohberger in that car, or he at least owned the car, or owned a car that looked like the same car that was going around the evidence, or the residence, I should say, that became evidence. So then, beyond that, now they have DNA that was left on a knife sheath there, touch DNA. They put it into the genealogy database, and they got a match with Papa Kohberger. Now, they were then able to recover trash from outside the Kohberger's home there in Pennsylvania. You see, Kohberger and his dad had driven home for the holidays. They had actually been stopped twice by police on the way home, and police are saying that was a coincidence. Don't know whether it was or wasn't. But anyhow, he's home in Pennsylvania with his parents. They go out and they get the trash, and then they state that was consistent with being a source of DNA from that knife sheath. You see, before the arrest, they had monitored Kohberger outside the home. They saw him multiple times. Now get this. He would wear surgical gloves when he was putting the trash bags inside the garbage can of a neighbor. Didn't put it in his garbage can. He put it in the garbage can of a neighbor. Oh, but remember, he did not know it, but he was under surveillance at the time. The items then were sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Now, they had said Kohberger had cleaned his car inside and out. They had a search warrant. They could not find anything in the car. He did not miss an inch of the area. According to authorities, a search of the home where he was, well, they did find a knife, a pistol, and a black face mask, as well as ID cards inside a glove box there in the house. Well, all of this comes down to his arrest. He was taken into custody by an FBI SWAT team at the Pennsylvania State Police on December the 30th, there at his home in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. Now, they found him. When they found him, he was in the kitchen. He had dressed in shirt and shorts, according to the information that I saw about his arrest. And he was also then wearing examination gloves. And again, putting trash into those Ziploc baggies. That leads us where we are today. You see, the defense is now claiming that evidence was not properly gathered. And if they succeed, oh, my friend, fruit from the so-called poison tree, it could eliminate important evidence to convince the jurors that Bryan Kohberger is guilty of these horrible crimes. And there's a lot online because remember, they're going for the death penalty. You see, Kohberger's attorneys, they are now saying that law enforcement violated his constitutional rights when they used that process. It's called Investigative Genetic Genealogy, or IGG, to identify suspects. They went on to say, quote, there would be no investigation into him without that original constitutional violation. That's what the attorneys are saying. And that's what Ann Taylor, one of his attorneys, said in the court filing. They said without IGG, there's no case, no requests for his phone records, surveillance of his parents' home, no DNA taken from the garbage out front, because the IGG analysis is the origin of this matter. Everything in the affidavit, according to them, should be excused or excluded. Now, the IGG process, this often starts when they find DNA at the scene of a crime. It may not reveal any results through the local standard law enforcement database. When that happens, investigators may then take a DNA sample and upload it to a genealogy database like GED Match, Family Tree DNA, and then they look for possible relatives to a person whose DNA was found at the scene. Now, you all know that we did an explosive episode some time back on the Golden State Killer and how he was found from 30 or 40 years later. He was found through IGG, through using this same method. Now, in Kohberger's case, investigators said they found touch DNA or trace DNA on the sheath of a knife that was found, the sheath, not the knife, the sheath of the knife that was found in the home where these students were stabbed. The FBI then used the IGG process, and they identified Kohberger eventually as a suspect after getting a hit on his father. So they're now saying that this is unconstitutional to do this, that people upload their DNA to these sites for trying to match and find their family tree, and that they should be they should have a sense of privacy, if you would, a right to privacy, if you would. Now, some of these DNA places, they have these all kinds of things you sign that says you waive it. We don't know whether it was waived or not in this situation. I do not think that there was a warrant used to get this. And here's another thing. Another thing that you're going to see in this case is that oftentimes investigators will actually try to get this search done by, I don't know whether you call it lying or not, but they just pretend to be someone who's trying to find somebody in their family tree. They don't usually announce that they are law enforcement, and that's the reason they're doing it. So in this idea of hiding the identity of police officers, is this constitutional or not? Well, we do know that the law says that police officers in an interrogation can lie to get the truth. Is this the same thing or not? Well, my friend, I got to tell you, there's a whole lot riding on this. There are those now, the prosecution is coming back. First of all, when it comes to the trash, you put your trash out on the curb, there should be no expectation of privacy. I think we all can agree with that part. But the idea was they would not know to go to that particular trash place, perhaps, without having known that they are going to now take the DNA from the father to try to get this match. So there's a whole lot at stake here, folks, a whole lot at stake. You see, the defense team says that once Kohberger was identified as a possible suspect, then they're going a step further. Now they're saying law enforcement officers either purposely or recklessly lied or omitted critical information when they asked the court to issue search warrants for his apartment, his parents' house, his car, his cell phone, and even for his own DNA. They want all that evidence kept out of trial. Wow. Well, folks, I got to tell you, these hearings this past week are critical to the case. Don't think that this is just something to sneeze at, my friend. I mean, do I believe that this evidence will be upheld? I believe it will. But let me ask you, should it? Should police have the right to go to a database where you uploaded your DNA to get some kind of information about your family tree? Can they then find themselves going to the same database, maybe under false pretense, and then get you linked to some crime, or maybe some family member of yours linked to some crime? That's what's at stake here. So far, in these situations, the prosecution, their cases have been upheld. So far, I don't know of any time that this DNA has been excluded. I don't know of any time that it become a fruit of the poison tree and then all the other evidence was excluded. But let me ask you, what about you? You see, if this stuff is ruled out, what evidence then do they have? A car in the area that night cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt that that person had done it. The person could be just driving around in the neighborhood. As the attorney said, he was just driving around in all the areas, not just there, but other areas. He said he was riding around stargazing because he could not sleep. Even turning your phone off for a period of time, which he did allegedly during the time the students were murdered, that could be explained away. The battery died or something like that. You see, my friend, this method of catching bad guys, IGG, Investigative Genetic Genealogy, is a key tool for law enforcement, and so far it's been held up in the courts. One case, though, all it takes is one case, could turn this tool on its head, and it would be a real blow in catching the bad guys. Well, I believe it will stand. But in the heart of our reasonable rights to privacy, should you expect that your DNA you send to check on your family tree to be private? What do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Reach out with a shout out. charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Take crime out of the equation. Think about the issue without the murder of these innocents. If you were to send your DNA off to trace your family tree, would you expect your DNA to be private? That's something to think about, isn't it? Well, as I said, I think that it's going to uphold. I don't think we're going to have to worry about this evidence being thrown out. Judge hasn't ruled on it yet. It'll be some time before the judge does rule on it. But when it happens, my friend, perhaps, the unthinkable could occur. The unthinkable, that all this evidence be thrown out, could occur. This was an unthinkable crime. These students deserve to live a wonderful life. It was snapped out. Their lives were snapped out much too early by this monster, this alleged monster this Bryan Kohberger, this alleged monster. And I hope, my friend, that he gets trial. I hope that he's convicted, and I hope that he's executed. But if the judge were to rule that the IGG is thrown out, and then the poison tree theory comes into play and all the other evidence is thrown out, we might have a different type of ball game when it comes to this trial in August. Hey, we'll keep you updated. This is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.